The strength to stand again. At 72 years old, Margaret had come to terms with slowing down. She had raised 3 children, worked as a kindergarten teacher for 35 years, and spent the past decade enjoying her garden, reading mystery novels, and knitting scarves for her grandchildren. But recently, her world had started to shrink. Everyday activities, walking up the stairs, bending down to pick up a book, or even standing for long periods, had turned into small battles. "You need to take it easy, Mom," her daughter Lily often said, helping her navigate the cobblestone path in the backyard. Margaret hated being treated like she was fragile, but part of her knew that Lily was right. Her legs felt weaker than ever. A trip to the grocery store left her exhausted, and though she hated to admit it, Margaret had begun using the chairlift to reach the second floor of her home. One breezy Sunday morning, as she watched her 3 grandchildren play tag from the porch, something in Margaret stirred. Ethan, her youngest at just 7 years old, darted across the lawn with boundless energy, laughing as his siblings chased him. She found herself wishing she could join in, the way she had years ago when they were toddlers. But now even walking briskly felt like a faraway dream. It was that moment of longing that led Margaret to take action. Later that evening, she turned on her laptop, a birthday gift from her son, and searched, "How to make my legs stronger as I get older." She scrolled past advertisements and fitness articles until one video caught her attention. "Your legs weaken first. Eat these 5 foods to keep them strong." Intrigued, she clicked. Almonds, small but mighty. The woman in the video introduced herself as a nutritionist and explained that weakened legs and bones were a natural part of aging. But the right foods could slow down this decline and even reverse it. Her first recommendation? Almonds. Margaret's pantry was already stocked with almonds, mostly for baking. But she never thought of them as much more than a crunchy snack. The video explained that almonds were rich in magnesium, calcium, and vitamin E, nutrients essential for keeping bones strong and muscles healthy. The woman even mentioned that soaking almonds overnight made them easier to digest and enhanced nutrient absorption. Determined to give it a try, Margaret set 8 almonds in a glass of water that night. The next morning, she added them to her oatmeal along with a handful of blueberries. To her surprise, the creamy texture of soaked almonds complemented the meal perfectly. Days turned into weeks, and eating almonds became part of her routine. Though her legs didn't feel like they'd regained their former strength overnight, Margaret noticed subtle changes. She felt more energized, and her knees didn't ache as much when she walked. Encouraged, she revisited the video to find out what else she could do for her legs. Sardines. An unexpected hero. Margaret wrinkled her nose as the nutritionist talked about sardines. "They're packed with calcium, vitamin D, and omega-3 fatty acids," the woman said. "Sardines are especially beneficial for seniors at risk of osteoporosis or joint inflammation." Margaret hadn't eaten a sardine in decades, not since her mother had forced her to try them as a child. But with a firm resolve, she added a small tin of sardines to her grocery list. The first time she opened the tin, Margaret braced herself for the smell. It wasn't as bad as she remembered, and upon her first hesitant taste, she discovered the fish wasn't as unpalatable as she'd feared. With encouragement from the video, Margaret experimented. She added sardines to salads, paired them with whole grain crackers, and even mixed them into a pasta dish. Within a few weeks, Margaret noticed a surprising improvement. Her joints, which had previously felt stiff and achy every morning, now felt looser and more mobile. With her confidence growing, she decided to try the next food on the list. Greek yogurt, sweet simplicity. Greek yogurt was a no-brainer. Margaret had eaten it on occasion, but now she began integrating it into her diet more intentionally. She loved its tangy taste, and it was versatile enough to pair with granola, fruit, or honey. The nutritionist explained how Greek yogurt was a powerhouse of calcium, protein, and probiotics, working not only to strengthen bones but also to improve gut health. Margaret's favorite discovery was blending Greek yogurt into smoothies with bananas and strawberries. They became her go-to breakfast, replacing the buttered toast she had relied on for years. She also started using Greek yogurt as a sour cream substitute when cooking for her family. What she enjoyed even more than the food itself was the sense of purpose and the promise of mobility it brought with it. For the first time in years, Margaret felt like she had some control over her health. An old remedy, bone broth. As the video recommended, Margaret added bone broth to her diet. She'd always associated bone broth with her grandmother's cooking, but the nutritionist explained its modern benefits. It was rich in collagen, calcium, magnesium, and amino acids, all vital for joint health and mobility. Making homemade broth became a therapeutic activity. Margaret gathered chicken bones, onions, carrots, and celery, simmering them in a large pot for hours while the house filled with rich, comforting aromas. The process transported her back to her childhood, to her mother's cozy kitchen during long winters. She drank a cup of bone broth each afternoon, relishing the warmth and savoring the way it made her feel nurtured. Over time, Margaret began to notice subtle but important changes. Her legs didn't tire as quickly, and she felt steadier on her feet when navigating stairs or uneven surfaces. The road to rediscovery. One sunny afternoon, Margaret decided to test her progress. She laced up a pair of walking shoes that had gathered dust in the corner of her closet and stepped outside. The park near her house had always been one of her favorite places, especially during the spring when the flowers were in full bloom. But for years, Margaret had avoided it. The uneven trails felt too risky, and she hated the idea of having to stop and rest after every turn. Today, though, Margaret felt different. She walked at a steady pace, her stride purposeful. Her legs didn't ache the way they had before she started her new diet, and she felt a renewed sense of confidence with every step. By the time she completed her first lap around the park, she was nearly in tears, not from pain, but from pride. Living with vitality, Margaret didn't stop there. She continued to incorporate almonds, sardines, Greek yogurt, and bone broth into her diet, finding new recipes and combinations that made each meal feel like an act of self-care. She even experimented with warm almond milk at night, a soothing ritual that helped her sleep better. By her 73rd birthday, Margaret felt like a different person. Her friends at church noticed the change, commenting on how spry she seemed during choir practice. Her daughter Lily was thrilled to see her mother back in the garden, pruning roses and planting tulips. But perhaps the greatest victory came one summer evening, when Margaret joined her grandchildren for a game of tag in the backyard. She couldn't keep up with 7-year-old Ethan, but for the first time in years, she didn't have to sit on the sidelines. As her grandchildren cheered her on, Margaret thought back to that initial video. She had started her journey to strengthen her legs, but she had gained so much more in return. Energy, confidence, and a renewed appreciation for the simple joys of life. The lesson. Margaret's story reminds us that it's never too late to take charge of our health. With a little effort and the right nutrients, the body can rebuild, recover, and thrive. She had reclaimed her strength, not just in her legs, but in her spirit. And for her, that was the greatest gift of all.